The second video I wanted to make was on the subject of my decision to share George Monbiot's thread on unity. It was really interesting for me to observe all the, shall we say, passionate responses, and actually the volume of passionate responses I received on that tweet, and underscored to me the real fears I have and concerns for the left and what I see as a failure on the left to learn from history. Now, I don't agree with every position that George Monbiot has held. I don't agree with every opinion he has. But I look at people on balance, and I believe strongly on balance that he is an ally, but that doesn't mean that I think he can't get it wrong, and I think that's true of all of us. I'm pretty sure that in time I will realise that some of the positions I hold are wrong. And I know certainly historically that there's been positions I've held which I wouldn't hold now because of conversations I've had, debates, because of information that I now have, and reading I have now done, which I hadn't done previously, which has shifted me. I believe as human beings we are works in progress, but I think we're going to have a real problem if we do not learn to understand that at times we will have to agree to disagree, and that there will be people who have different opinions to us on some things, but on balance there is lots of things that we can agree with and work from there. I think that if we don't learn this and fast, we are moving into very dangerous territory as we witness our society's descent into fascism and corporate funded totalitarianism. That, combined with ecological breakdowns, means that this is one of the most dangerous times that we find ourselves living in as humans. We know, or we can witness already, that vulnerable groups are already being targeted and have lost their lives because of the society that has been created by the 1%. With the policing bill, with the Borders and Nations bill, minority groups are going to be increasingly targeted. I feel, for the Gypsy, Roma and Traveller community at this time, who are witnessing legislation come into effect that will give the green light for pogroms against them, things that haven't been seen since Nazi Germany. But we know that those things spread. It never ever ends just with one group. I mean, we should fight regardless of whether it spreads or not. So I think that if we cannot understand that we need to unite, even at times with people we cannot agree with everything on, it may be the end for us. And I really implore people to reflect on that and understand that, and quickly, because we are running out of time to actually be able to do anything about it. And I think that if we're going to look at, if we're going to hold people to these impossible standards, then what I'm going to say is that we should be consistent with that. Like, I've looked at some of the people, some of the responses that people had, and I don't want to attack anyone. Is the reason for this video is to try and get people, one, to understand my position and why I hold it, but also to encourage them to reflect. And I'm not going to pretend I always get it right, because I don't. But some of the people who've responded are people who are adamant that George Galloway is an ally. Now, I personally have huge problems with George Galloway, not because he hasn't made some incredible arguments, not because I don't recognise that he has been an important ally in the past and made, taken the right stances and fought the right fights on occasions, but because some of his rhetoric has been dog whistling, similar or not dissimilar to some of the rhetoric of Nigel Farage. Bearing in mind that he never condemned the poster, that hideous poster that Nigel Farage created, most recently when he intimated, he didn't categorically state, but intimated in his show on RT that refugees arriving in boats may have been responsible for the terrorist attack in Liverpool. Like I said, he didn't categorically stated it, but if you listen, he certainly intimated. That's what I got from watching him speak on the subject. And yet people will say that he's an ally. Um, Now, I do have a problem with him, but I'm not going to attack the whole of the Workers' Party because of it. And I do think that there's lots of things that he says that I do agree with. But if we're going to apply these standards to George Monbiot, then it's only right that we apply those same standards to George Galloway. And I would say what George Galloway has stated is far more dangerous and undermines our movement far more than what George Monbiot has said. But also, if we're going to apply these standards, then we need to also apply those same standards to Jeremy Corbyn. It's important for us to understand that the witch hunts that we witness, obviously building and being escalated under Keir Starmer, started under Jeremy Corbyn. Jeremy Corbyn allowed good people to be thrown under a bus. People like Chris Williamson, Mark Wadsworth, Jackie Walker, and others. And yet people are shouting and attacking and accusing George Monbiot, and yet idolise Jeremy Corbyn. Now, I love Jeremy Corbyn. He's the very reason why I joined the Labour Party. He's the very reason why I even got involved in politics. I was always into human rights, always concerned about the environment, have been for many, many years. And nominally, I would have said that I was a Green for that reason. But it was Jeremy Corbyn that actually got me actively involved in politics to a point where I joined a party. But to this day, he has not expressed solidarity with Chris Williamson. And yet nobody is calling him out. And not that I'm saying that we should, because one thing I have learned as a human being is you do not put people on pedestals, because human beings are flawed. That is part of the human condition. And when you put people on pedestals, they will always let you down. And I think we need to come to terms with that. But I also think that we need to understand that at times people are going to hold different opinions to us, and we have got to get over that. It's, that's not to say we don't ask them why. It's not to say that we don't debate with them. It's not to say that we don't tell them that we're disappointed. But we have got to learn to speak, comrades, with each other. I just cannot understand why we cannot learn to do that. And I'm not talking about forming alliances with centrists or with liberals, who we know throughout history have enabled fascists. I'm talking about people who tend to lean towards the left, and even actually, whether we like it or not, working class people who tend to be conservative in some areas. That doesn't mean we let go of our values, but we have to understand that we need to meet people where they are, not where we want them to be, and learn to have the conversations again. Because if all we are ever going to do is to scream and shout and to label people, all that does is push people into more extreme positions, but also just does the job of the ruling classes, which is to divide us. We need to understand that they have designed a system that keeps us in fight or flight. And when we're in fight or flight, our critical thinking and reasoning skills are scanty. We cannot use them in the same way. And if we come along and start screaming at people, all that happens is we push them further and further into that fight or flight state. And I think that this is why I keep saying to people that we have got to learn to develop our emotional intelligence and understand what informs behaviour, but also to understand not a single one of us is going to get it right on all things all of the time, but we have got to learn to speak to each other. We have got to learn to understand that most people are decent enough. If that wasn't the case, then there wouldn't be so many movies that have an underdog that we almost universally root for. And I feel that really strongly. So I guess all I'm asking people to do and to reflect upon is that we have got to not be so, well, puritanical, really, and not have our standards so high and think that we're so high and mighty that we cannot allow room for a difference in opinion. Sometimes we have got to learn to agree to disagree, and I have learnt from doing that you can actually reach out and shift people, and actually people have managed to shift me on things. I have a friend, Eddie, who I did the podcast with on Palestine, and we are a really good example of two friends, he's come to be my friends, who have really disagree with each other on certain things. There's a lot we agree on too. There's some things we strongly disagree on each other, but we have learnt to still have respect for one another and still to speak. And from that, we can make progress, we can move forward, and we can unite on the things that we do agree with. Because if we want to have a chance of having any kind of future that is worth living, that is what it's going to take. Anyway, I don't want to be preaching to people. Like I said, I just want to share my thoughts in a hope that some people might find them useful, but just encourage people to really think on the subject and to recognize why these things are so important and what the consequences if basically we don't get over ourselves. Anyway, that's quite a lot of talking on a subject. I've gone a little around the houses, but hopefully that makes sense. And obviously, if you have any questions, please let me know. If you have any thoughts, I hope you find it helpful. Thank you.